Before you do anything else, I need you to give me the next few minutes. That's all. Because what I'm about to show you about the Golden State Warriors and Michael Porter Jr. isn't in any headline yet, but it's starting to circulate in the place where things are born before they become news. In the back rooms, in the conversations of people on the inside. I'm not going to fool you and say it already happened. I'm going to do something that grips harder. I'm going to prove to you step by step why this is one of the few paths that can still save Stephen Curry's last dance. And at the end, I'm going to show you the accounting move. Yes, accounting that suddenly turns this impossible thing into something possible. Stick with me because it's the kind of detail that changes everything and that 90% of people are going to miss. Let me start by giving it to you straight about where the Warriors are today, because the fan base needs to hear this unfiltered. Last season ended in disappointment. The team finished outside the real playoffs, fell in the play-in, closed the year with a losing record. It was the 4th time in 12 seasons under Steve Kerr that the Warriors missed the playoffs. And this one hurt more than the others, because this roster was built to compete now, not to drift into another offseason full of questions. And the questions are heavy. Curry is turning 38, Draymond Green is 36, Al Horford 40, and Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler is coming back from one of the toughest injuries in the sport, a torn ACL in his right knee, suffered mid-season that took him out for the rest of the year. Let that picture settle. Because it's the fuel for everything that comes next. The Warriors aren't in a rebuild. The Warriors are in a countdown. Every offseason that passes is one bullet fewer in the chamber. And when you have Stephen Curry still playing at an elite level, but with the clock ticking, you don't have the luxury of waiting. You have to make the move now. And that's where the team's math starts to point almost on its own to a very specific type of player. Hold on to this. What the Warriors need most is not another creator. They have Curry. What they need is size and shooting on the wing. A big who opens the floor and turns Curry's gravity into easy points for everyone else. And there's a name on the market who fits that description like a glove. You already know which one. But before I place the piece, I need to update you on Michael Porter Jr. Because if your image of him is still the quiet third option from Denver, you're looking at a player who no longer exists. MPJ was traded to the Brooklyn Nets in July 2025. And Brooklyn even got an unprotected 2032 first-round pick, just so you have a sense of how this guy is valued. And in Brooklyn, on a team that lost more than 60 games, MPJ exploded. Best season of his career, 24 points per game, 7 rebounds. He took the highest shooting volume of his life, and even with all that load, barely dropped in efficiency. A guy who's 6'10", shooting 40% from the perimeter over his entire career. And hold on to this stat, because it's the ace up the sleeve. At that shooting volume over his career, only 2 people in the league have been more accurate than MPJ. One of them is Zach LaVine. The other is Stephen Curry himself. Let me repeat that so you can process it. The second most efficient shooter in the league at high volume over the last decade, behind only Curry, could be playing next to Curry. Can you imagine the hell that would be for any defense? Steve Kerr runs a system of perpetual motion, of screens, of ball whipping around, where Curry drags 2-3 defenders behind him like a comet. And what the Warriors have always been missing in recent years is a reliable and tall finisher on the other side of that gravity. A guy who doesn't vanish in the playoffs. A guy who, when the ball swings and reaches him open, launches it over the defender without even jumping much, because he's too tall to be contested. That's MPJ. It's the fit the Warriors have been chasing for years and never managed to complete. So why hasn't it happened yet? Here's where the video gets serious, and where I'm going to be more honest with you than most channels are. The obstacle is huge, and it has a name: money. The Warriors are in an extremely tight financial situation. They have a handful of players eating up practically the entire salary cap. There's Curry's monster contract, there's Draymond, there's Horford, and there's, hanging over everything, Jimmy Butler's contract. Nearly $57 million for next season for a player turning 37 who's coming back from serious knee surgery. The Warriors in practice have no cap space to sign anyone relevant. The only way for them to add a player of MPJ's caliber is through a trade. And to trade, you have to send salary back. A lot of salary. And this is exactly where the piece that locks everything turns into the piece that unlocks everything. Pay attention, because this is the point I promised you at the start. Jimmy Butler's contract, that nearly $57 million that looks like dead weight on the team's books, is, from a trade standpoint, the cleanest asset the Warriors have. Think with me. If Butler comes back near his old level, great. The Warriors keep a dangerous veteran core. But if the front office looks at that knee, at that age, at that giant salary, and decides the risk is too high, that contract becomes the perfect trade chip. A big, expiring salary, the kind other teams love to take on to clean up their future books. And Michael Porter Jr. is also in the final year of his deal. So look at the accounting fit. The Warriors send Butler's contract, expiring, big, attractive to a rebuilding team, and get back MPJ, younger, healthier on the perimeter, and a far better fit next to Curry. The math closes, the salaries match, and on Brooklyn's side, a team rebuilding with a bunch of young guys and draft picks, taking on a big expiring contract like Butler's might be exactly the kind of flexibility they want for the future. See how something that looked impossible suddenly finds a path? It's not fantasy, it's the cold logic of the NBA salary sheet, and that's why when the market starts to whisper about the Warriors and MPJ, people who understand contracts don't laugh, people who understand pay attention, but I promise real investigation, so let's get to the other side, because it exists and it matters. First, does Brooklyn go for it? Brooklyn has its own plans. They have a bunch of young guys on cheap contracts, a bunch of first-round picks stashed away, and a part of the front office that sees MPJ as someone they want around for the good times, not as trade meat, so it's not guaranteed they'd give him up. Second, MPJ's own risk. That history of back injuries that haunts his career is real, and for a team already full of veterans with high mileage, Curry, Draymond, Horford, adding another body with a fragile history is a bet inside a bet. And third, does Golden State really want to give up the experience and defense Butler brings, even injured, for a player never known for his defense? These are the questions that make a front office hesitate, and it's precisely that hesitation that keeps everything in the realm of what if. For now, let me paint the full picture for you, the way it would exist on an October night in the Bay Area. Imagine the ball swinging. Curry comes off a Draymond screen, drags two defenders. The ball goes to Podziemski, who sees the cut and kicks it to the corner. And there, waiting at 6'10", Michael Porter Jr. launches the shot over everybody. Net. Imagine that happening 12, 15 times a game. Imagine Curry finally having, in the final stretch of his career, a second tall scorer who doesn't disappear in the big moments. Can you see that Warriors team giving the league one last big scare? Because I can. And Steve Kerr, the guy who's already said that as long as Curry is on the floor, he won't rule out beating anybody in a 7-game series, knows very well what a piece like that would do for the team's ceiling. And that's why I want you to understand what's really at stake here. It's not just a trade, it's the Warriors' entire philosophy in this final stretch. As long as Curry is bought in, committed, playing at a high level, the franchise isn't going to simply blow everything up and rebuild. They're going to walk that razor-thin line between building a competitive team around him and not draining the bank of future assets. And a trade for a player like MPJ, a guy in the prime of his age with the perfect fit costing the contract of an injured veteran, is exactly the kind of calculated bet that philosophy allows. It's aggressive without being suicidal. It's the play of someone who wants one last hand without burning the entire future. So I turn the question back to you, Warriors fan. Would you do it? Would you send Jimmy Butler away with all the history and grit he brought for 2 years of one of the best big man shooters in the league next to the greatest shooter in history, knowing MPJ's back risk, knowing it's a bet on the health of a guy who plays season by season? Or would you hold Butler, bet that the knee comes back 100% and run this last dance with the core you already know? Because that's the conversation that, from what's circulating in the back rooms, is happening in this kind of closed room right now, in the middle of the offseason. It's not a ready-made headline, it's a calculation. It's a front office weighing risk against reward, knee against shooting, present against future. And the most important thing I can tell you is, a trade like this doesn't give warning. It doesn't come slowly. It drops on some random morning in an alert on your phone, and suddenly Curry's last dance has a new chapter nobody saw coming. Before you go, keep the timing in your head. Curry wants to extend his contract and keep playing. The clock on the dynasty era is ticking. The Warriors have a size and shooting hole on the wing that's been screaming for years. Butler is a big, expiring contract that serves perfectly as a trade chip. And MPJ is on the market in the final year of his deal, coming off the best season of his life. All the ingredients are on the table, all of them. Someone just has to strike the match. And in the NBA, when the ingredients line up like this, the wait is rarely long. So that's it. I didn't bring you a lie. I brought you a read on the backstage that's too real to ignore. And I want to hear from you. Comment down below. Curry and Michael Porter Jr. On the same floor, does that save The Last Dance? Or is it too big a bet for such an old team? I read it all. If you made it this far, drop the like and subscribe, because the day this bomb goes off, and I'd bet a version of it will hover over this offseason until the very last minute, you'll want to be here so we can react together. Live. See you in the next one. Thanks.